Hey guys, it's Avery Carl, author of Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. And today we are going to talk about things that do not add value to a short-term rental. So there are lots and lots of ways, lots and lots of content on how to add value to properties. But today we are going to talk about things that do not add value to a short-term rental. A common misconception about short-term rental investing that I hear investors make is I'm buying the business. That is true, sort of commercial properties that are valued based on the income that they produce. But short-term rentals, in most cases, are valued as residential assets, which means that they are valued based on other similar residential sold comps in the area. So what that means is that a property that is on the same street, so two properties on the same street, one of them is a short-term rental and one of them is a primary home, and the short-term rental has $100,000 in rental history. That short-term rental is worth the same amount as the primary home, assuming they are the same floor plan, similar finishes, whether it has rental history or not, because it's a residential asset, and residential assets are valued based on sold comps and not the income they produce. So that's an important thing to remember when you're shopping for short-term rentals is you're buying the real estate. You are not buying the business, and it's important not to get caught up in intangible items that do not add value to the appraised value of that property. And that's what we're going to go over today. A short-term rental that has some rental history and has been a good performer that is similar to the house next door that's a primary home is worth the same amount on an appraisal that the house next door is worth, even though the house next door does not have rental history and is not income producing. So just want to clear that up a little bit before we get into the things that do not add value to a short-term rental. And keep in mind as we go through this list that while some of these items might make the property more desirable to an investor, we're talking about the actual appraisal value with a lender. So while some of these things might make you want to buy the property more, they don't necessarily have any bearing on what the property will appraise for. The first item that does not add value to a short-term rental when you are shopping is the fact that the property has good reviews. So good reviews, while they're nice to have, are a product of good management and not necessarily the property itself. You are not buying the management, you are buying the property. So any value in that good management does not convey to you. It's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to transfer listings from one owner to another on the online travel agencies like Airbnb and Vrbo. Some of them don't allow it. Some of them have some workarounds, but in most cases, those reviews are not going to transfer to you anyway. So they really don't have any value to you. Now, along those same lines, the second item that does not add value to your short-term rental is rental history. Good rental history is great, and it might make the property more desirable to a larger number of investors, which could drive the price that is willing to be paid up. It does not affect the appraised value of the property. So if you're getting a loan, then rental history does not affect that property value. So the appraiser does not take rental history into account when they're valuing the property. They only take recent residential sold comps. So while rental history is great to have, it is a variable, and any different manager can do different numbers with the property. So it's not something that should be taken as gospel. It's definitely a variable, but it's also something that really does not add any value to the property itself. All right. And the last item that does not add value to your short-term rental is a really big gotcha, because a lot of sellers will try to charge extra for this: future bookings. So if you're buying a $500,000 property and it has $50,000 in future bookings, the property is still worth $500,000. That $50,000 does not add value to the property. And there's a few reasons for that. A, as we discussed throughout this video, you're not buying the business, you are buying the property. And B, there's a really good chance that you don't want those future bookings anyway. There's a number of reasons for that. One is because you don't know the quality of the guests, or at what rate they were booked. $50,000 could be 2 years in the future worth of rental history. And that's just not something you want to deal with, because that means they're charging a very low price per night. You also don't know the quality of the guests. You don't know if they've allowed parties, if they've allowed pets, things that you don't necessarily want in your short-term rental. It's not something that really adds value. Those future bookings, even though lots of sellers will tell you, well, I'm giving you $50,000, they're not. You're not buying the business, you're buying the property, and the property is worth what the residential sold comps are. In most cases, there may be a few markets that operate a little bit differently, but in most cases, that's not going to add value. And that is a really big gotcha point when shopping for short-term rentals. Future bookings do not add value to the property. Okay, guys, that is going to do it for me today. What do you think? Are there any other intangible items that people think might add value to a short-term rental but don't? Drop them in the comments and pick up short-term rental, long-term wealth at www.biggerpockets.com/store. Catch you next time.